Welcome to Interview from Mexico. I'm Laura Carlson, and I'll be your host as we look at cutting-edge issues with the men and women who know them best, here on Telesur. They wanted to bury us, but what they didn't know is that we are seeds. This has become the slogan of youth, especially since Ayotzinapa, in response to the repression and the injustice that they face. You hear it in the streets, but you also hear it in the music, where the seeds of protest are generating new forms of rebellion.
El uso legítimo de la fuerza pública es necesario, pero insuficiente.
¡Luchando!
Protesta es tu derecho, pero más que eso es tu obligación. Protesta si bajo tu pecho todavía late un corazón. Protesta es la conciencia colectiva que despierta. Protesta es la marea humana que se manifiesta. Es tu derecho, pero más que eso es tu obligación. Protesta si bajo tu pecho todavía late un corazón. Protesta es la conciencia colectiva que despierta. Protesta es la marea humana que se manifiesta.
To talk about the issue of protest music in Mexico, I'm very pleased to be here in the Quetzalcoatl Forum in Iztapalapa with a great group. First of all, we have with us today Lengua Alerta. Lengua Alerta is a musician who's won numerous awards at the Indio Music Awards, and he recently produced a song about the missing students of Ayotzinapa called For Those. Thanks so much for being here with us today. We're also here with Gran Om. Gran Om is a music producer and a graphic artist, and in fact, he produced the videos of the other two musicians we'll be talking about. Thanks for being here. And finally, we're here with Gabo Revueltas. Gabo Revueltas is another musician with very close ties to social music and causes of social injustice, and he's also produced a video about the disappeared students of Ayotzinapa. Thanks so much for being on Interview from Mexico. Now, I wanted to start with you. Your music is protest music. It's not music that just comes from the studio, but that's very closely tied to the social movements here in Mexico. Did you begin this way on purpose? Is this your vision from the beginning of your career?
Well, I began the project of Lengua Alerta with this intention, inspired by other bands and some artists who used music in the same way, as a tool to communicate these kinds of issues, and to use music and art in general as tools to change a little society. So, since the project of Lengua Alerta began, that's been the vision, to communicate and give voice to different social struggles through music.
And was this also the case with you two, that you began with this social vision first and then brought the art into it?
Well, yes. The initial intention was always this. In fact, I think it was the reserve. First came the social concerns, or the desire to see political and social transitions in Mexico, that is, in our own surroundings. And finally, well, to utilize art, as a tool to talk about these things, about these processes. And yes, at least on my part, it was intentional to use graphic art, to get involved in the world of graphics, and to begin to produce materials in video with a little more quality, with the intention of supporting, in some way, certain social movements, or social transitions in the country.
And Gabo, in one of your songs, you talk about protest and you say, it's not a right, it's an obligation. Why do you think that?
Mainly for what is happening in our country and what is happening in Latin America and in all parts of the world, where protest is being criminalized. Protest has been losing ground, mainly due to issues of the acts of repression and the disappearances, and so many things that we have seen that have been done, especially to the grassroots leaders and to activists. We've seen it here, and we've seen it in many places, in Brazil, in Chile. We've seen it in Central America and in other parts of the world. So taking into account all this that has happened, it's important to defend the protest. It's a right, it's an obligation, as much as human beings working for human rights. no?
Es un derecho, es una obligación, tanto como seres humanos trabajando por los derechos humanos, ¿no?
And do you feel that this is especially true of an artist?
Well, I don't know if it has to be obligatory for everyone, at least from my perspective, and I think in agreement with my friends. And that's why we continue to work together. We do consider that art has to have, at least, a social commitment. And there's a phrase that I like to use a lot. It's exactly art as the service of the people. I'm not saying that everyone has to do it this way, but I do think that there are moments, especially very specific points in time, when the artistic community, in the broadest sense, should pay more attention to social processes. And today, with Mexico how it is, I think it's important to set aside abstractions and personal proposals and concentrate our efforts more in collective proposals, much more generalized concerns, because the country isn't okay, and it's not going to be okay. And art, I think, invites us in and can spur people to join in, as Gabo explained, not just to fight for rights, but also to exercise them, to demonstrate in favor of certain things. That is to say, to be active. And I think that art should at least take that position, at least in the context that we find ourselves in today.
Y Lengua Alerta, your songs have these themes of social movements. How do you think you formed this collectivity through music?
Well, the music itself has done the work of getting us together, right? In this case, my relationship with Gran Om was through music. He heard some of my songs and he approached me. And later Gabo and I had been meeting for a while because we played in the same forums and also we play in demonstrations or in solidarity concerts. So really it's not a very large scene in which most of us are doing this kind of artistic expression and we get to know each other. So I think that art in itself brought us together because we have similar ideas.
And then I meant to mention too that you're united in several projects, including Mexican Sound System, and the video that we mentioned of Gabo's called Ayotzinapa Roars. And then how do the people get involved in this? What do you think the impact is on the listeners?
Well, you start to get involved first based on what we do in our music, and then through social networks, which is where the main impact of what we are doing is. And it's very important to be present in these spaces too, because sometimes they are just about frivolous things, very banal themes. And it's very important to emphasize this, because there's a situation of injustice, and this is what reaches the people too. These situations of injustice that might happen to someone in one state of the Republic. But we are not exempt from it. It's happening to us too, no? We could find ourselves in that kind of situation.
Yeah, I noticed that on the social networks, while some songs will only have comments regarding the music, on your songs and on your work, there are scores, hundreds of comments regarding the politics that express the opinions about the issues themselves. Well, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Those who protested, for those being arrested.
Welcome back. During the break here, we were just talking about hundreds of projects that are in the wings and also about the international tours. I wanted to talk to you about that. You two just returned from Europe. What was the response there to your work and to what's happening in Mexico?
Well, Lengua comes from a pretty long tradition of touring through Europe, through different parts of Europe, and, well, throughout the world. For me, it was the first time in Europe showing my work. I had been there several times, but not in conditions like this, showing my work. And it was interesting to see the responses. Let's say it was an experiment. in the same way that we've been experimenting with different disciplines: the music, the graphic arts, the videos, and, in short, all with these social concerns. And it was really
like, there was a lot of interest among the people, right? Like, a lot of curiosity. They were the majority of the people who went, because we did exhibits of his graphic art combined with concerts, right? And the people, most of the people, knew about the case of the 43 students of Ayotzinapa, but they didn't know a lot of other things that are happening here, right? Like the question of the mining companies, like the issue of the yaquis. So there was a lot of curiosity on the part of the people, and this...
And you talked about all that on the tour.
Yes, you can say that an important part of the tour for us was not just for us to go to Europe and make a conquest of Europe in this sense of individual terms, but for us it was important, yes, to show our work, but because our work talks about a lot of things beyond us. So, of course, all the exhibits, all the concerts, gave us a lot of contact with a lot of people from all over the world. In the first place, the majority Hispanic people living in Europe, but there was also a really good response from the people of Germany, the Czech Republic and Norway, who were interested. They were really curious, and they were surprised that so many things were happening in Mexico, no?
And as you say, this took place at a time when Mexico has sadly been in the news because of the Ayotzinapa case. And Gabo, you're about to take off for Uruguay and Peru. What message do you hope to take to new audiences there?
Bueno, principalmente es un proyecto independiente y autogestivo lo que vamos a
Well,
hacer.
what we are going to do, it's an independent, self-financed project. It's a project where we are going to promote the work we are doing musically. We are going on a tour to Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. And we want to take this message because we have realized that not only is this happening in Mexico, but it's happening in the global level and especially in Latin America, where the exploitation of natural resources, the violation of human rights,
la violación a los derechos humanos y
criminalization of protest.
Exactly, the criminalization of protest. All of this is happening especially in Latin America. We see it in Chile with the privatization of education, and with the mines in Peru too, and in Guatemala. We see it in many countries of Latin America. So it's very important to take this message too. This is not just about music, to take this message of resistance, a cultural message. The resistance has to be through culture, because this is what the people who are inside this system of capital can take from us. Our culture is what makes us great, and this is what we are trying to take through music.
And it's much harder to repress culture, specifically for a government, it seems, too. I wanted to turn to the musical part of it, because we've talked about how they're completely united, you know, the political message and the music that you do, but those of us who aren't cultural creators, you know, have a tremendous, I think, curiosity about the creative process itself. Lengua, how do you write your words, especially? You know, your songs are really focused on that message with very sophisticated lyrics. How do you develop those?
Well, I don't have a really specific technique. I just try to always have on hand a notebook or something that I can record with, a telephone or a recorder, and I try to make writing an exercise. I try to make it as often as possible.
So just ideas that pop up in the course of the day?
Yeah, and the reality is too that we live in a country where every day a lot of things happen, and this is something that is a constant inspiration too. And I'm also interested in writing really clear lyrics that are very understandable, but also without leaving aside the poetry. So I try to do this mixture between sending out a clear message, but in a poetic form.
And then, how do you translate this into your visual language?
A little like Lengua says, there is no method. I think the essential, the main thing, at least what we agree on in our projects, And what I do in visual arts is that it has to have an engine, and the engine is the concern, and the sincere concern is that we are not satisfied with the way things are. I think this is the main motor. Some things are much more simple, others are much more politicized, but I think that what motivates us is a sincere concern, and I think that's the most important thing, and we want to point it out from different perspectives. There are some that point it out through writing, and there are those who point it out producing the music, because this is also a fundamental part of the project that we're all participating in. Those who write, but also those who are doing the music, those who are doing the video, those who are doing the graphic art. That is to say that a whole community of artists is forming, not just of singers or producers, but of artists. And when you consider yourself an artist, you can go way beyond doing just a text or just a video. Well, it can have greater resonance, a much more powerful impact in this sense.
Yeah, and the products themselves are multidisciplinary, the videos and the way you combine concerts and visual art and everything. That's fascinating. Well, we'll go to another pause. We'll be right back after a brief moment.
Quisieron enterrarnos, pero no sabían que éramos semillas. Quisieron enterrarnos, pero no sabían que éramos semillas.
Welcome back. We're here talking about protest music and art, and we were talking about the message, and I think, you wanted to add something to that.
Yes, well, for me, more than putting us in the role of messengers to carry a message to other parts of the planet, I think it's to send and explain a message. But when we leave our country, when we leave our radius, I don't think the main intention is to share the message. I think this happens as a consequence, because our work talks about this. But when we go abroad, what we are really doing is to weave networks, to form a much wider community, more than to take a message. We're really weaving networks, because we don't want to go to Peru just to talk about Ayotzinapa. Of course, we're going to talk about what's happening to us, but in Peru, there are many problems that need to be talked about, in Argentina too, and Berlin. That is to say, in all parts of the planet there are problems. And at least, from my perspective, the intention is to go to get to know each other and to work toward building better communities, from the artistic part, which is what we do. But not with the intention of going to Germany to tell them what Mexico is like. We do it because this is where we are. But when we share with people abroad, it has to do with strengthening ourselves as an international community, you know? And as a consequence, they are interested in the processes in Mexico, but in the same way that we are interested in what happens in Mexico. We are interested in the processes of the friends in other countries, you know?
So you're really breaking some molds here, because we think of performance art especially as either performance, you stand up and perform before the people, or as when it's protest-oriented, delivering a message. But this idea of creating community through art is really something a little different than most people think. Do you find that in your work as well, Gabo?
Claro, principalmente nos damos cuenta.
Sure, we realize it in these things that also make us brothers and sisters, like the struggles. I don't know.
Como son las luchas. No sé, en el caso de Perú,
In the case of Peru, it's very recent what's happening with Group Mexico, which is a mining consortium that is also coming into Peru, and that is also in Guatemala, and that is also in Chile. So, these are things that are affecting them the same way they are affecting us, no? So, well, the important thing is to raise our voices and join together in the communities, based on what is common to our experience. So, this is a way to make ourselves stronger, because this is what has happened to us, that we have lost this force, they have taken it from us. So, it's to strengthen ourselves too.
Well, Ayotzinapa has really been the lightning rod in Mexico in this past year anyway for bringing together those communities and also joining artists more with movements. But these other issues that you talk about are the issues that are shared in other countries and that are creating these broader networks as well. In Lengua, I wanted to mention one of those because you have a beautiful song called Mujer, woman that, of course, is an issue dear to my heart. How was it that you came to write that song?
Well, I think mainly because I was tired of hearing the same song 1,000 times, of dramas and relationships on the radio, right?
Of love and breakups.
Yeah, all suffering and all the guilty conscience, and all the dramatic scenes. And I think too that, I don't know, I wanted to reflect a little what it's been like for me in my personal life, in relationships with women, to, well, create, to communicate this through music, and to give them this place they deserve. A lot of times, as a society, as men and even as women, among women themselves, there's a lot of machismo. So it was to raise my voice and talk about how beautiful and how strong they are too, to reflect this force that they have, that inspires us.
Breaking new molds. So we've been talking about the role of culture in these political messages. Why do you think it's such an effective tool in getting messages out, and it's something that reaches so many people, especially in our case here in Mexico?
Well, it's what gives us our roots. It gives us our base, our culture. In many other parts of the world, they don't have what we have here, these deep roots, this base. In all Latin America, we are characterized by this hot blood, and so it's to tap into what they have tried to hide for so long, to repress it, and to imagine that Mexico suddenly explodes through its culture. We can see it in different cultures that we have, the Maya, the Toltec, the Olmec, everything.
Lo podemos ver con las diferentes culturas que tenemos, la maya, la tolteca, olmeca, todo.
Well, unfortunately, we have very little time left in the program, but who would like to give a last message to our audience? We have thousands of youth who are watching this show right now, so it's a great opportunity. Let's take advantage of it.
Bueno, igual voy a hablar por mí, creo que coincido, o mis compañeros coinciden.
Well, in the same way, I can only speak for myself, and I think my friends would agree. And not just those of us who are here, but a lot of people who are close to us, and even ones who are far away, but who would like to meet to share reflections, to share experiences, to encourage these transitions not only in Mexico, but all over the world. But it seems to me that the last comment in this sense would be to invite everyone, and especially youth, to get together and make an effort. Of course, our project is political, sustained by art, but it has to do with being self-sustainable, with independence. This is something that many don't talk about and don't want to talk about. Our project is anti-capitalist, and it's a project of self-sustainability. And the invitation is for you to create, because they are the ones who have the conditions to make new proposals and to transform it. But for real, not a hypocritical transition like what's been done up to now. The young people have to change the direction and the course 180 degrees. We're going in one direction, and they have all the possibility to take us somewhere else, to change direction 180 degrees.
And you too, what would you say?
To not let anything take away your hope. Lately we realize that the media are directed, and politics is directed, to the same end, to rob the people of their hope. So, don't let anyone take away your hope, ever.
Para quien levanta la voz, para quien empuña la palabra, para quien conoce el poder y la fuerza que a la verdad acompaña, para quien exige justicia, para quien actúa y no calla, para quien a pesar de todo se mantiene fiel a su causa, para aquel que no se dejó caer, aunque nada parecía ir bien, para aquel que sigue luchando y sigue confiando al 100, pues este sentimiento no lo podrán arrancar, la esperanza nos alumbra para poder avanzar.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lengua Alerta, El Gran Gabo Revueltas. And thank you. We'll be back next week on Interview from Mexico.